Welcome to PR on the Record, the podcast that explores the role of PR in shaping success within the global tech ecosystem. I'm Ariel Shapiro.
And I'm Shahni Ben-Haim. Today we're joined by Ido Cohen, VP of Global Brand and Communications at Lightricks. With a career spanning brand strategy, communications, and influencer marketing, Ido has guided Lightricks through major industry shifts, particularly in the generative AI space. Leading a team of 20 marketers, he has shaped the company's voice and narrative, ensuring that its technology, products, and brand storytelling remain at the forefront of innovation.
Lightricks AI models allow creators and brands to leverage the latest research breakthroughs, offering endless control over their creative potential, so it's easy to just become part of someone else's story. In this podcast episode, we'll discuss what tactics and strategies Ido and his team use to ensure Lightricks maintains ownership of its story. Thanks for joining us, Ido. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. Can you just share a bit about what Lightricks does for those who might not be familiar, and how you take the message from Lightricks and turn it into valuable PR opportunities?
Lightricks is a company that basically, I'm going to try and do some of the fluff, so forgive me, okay? But we bridge the gap between imagination and creation, right? So we allow people to basically form some sort of an imagination, but also have the tools in order to basically create output and create content, right? And I think what we were able to do using different tools from our early beginnings to today is basically allow people to create content in a scalable, sort of like very easy and fun and intuitive way. We obviously started off with Facetune, which is our flagship product. I joined the company because of that product, taking the sort of like authority that all these big companies had around technology and how, we're seeing commercials and like people taking photos that wasn't accessible at the time. People weren't able to do that, especially not on mobile. And we saw the opportunity and we're able to sort of like grab that space and allow people to basically add it on mobile. That's kind of like our bread and butter where we started. And we added on with almost 11 apps throughout time. And currently today we have 5 business verticals. So the first one is Facetune. The second one, we have Photoleap, our photo editing app, and Videoleap, our video editing app, kind of like squished together. We do a lot of work around those two together. And then we have, we acquired a company called Popular Pays, which is an influencer marketing agency, um, basically allowing creators to not only monetize their content, but also to work easily with brands. And we also have our LTX Studio, which is our first fully AI product that basically allows you to have creative development co-pilot. As you know, AI is your creative development co-pilot, which is a really cool thing. I'd love for us to talk more about it. But if you take all these different products and sort of like combine it with what I initially told you about bridging the gap between imagination and creation, they allow people to have more control over the content that they create, because creating content is something that you need help with. You need the editing experience to be mindful of you, and you need to control the AI, and it also allows you to iterate and enjoy the process. So we pretty much lower the entry bar for everyone to participate and create content altogether. And how do you turn it into PR, to valuable message in PR? I think specifically now, given the, AI became such a buzzword, with everyone sort of like using AI in every other ad or company name. And I think what distinguishes us is the fact that we we don't neglect the human creativity in the process. We feel like we're kind of what I told you about, like LTX being a co-pilot. It's always hand in hand. And I think given that everyone's trying to talk about like automation and scalability and a generation and all these sorts of things, and having that sort of like position where human creativity is enhanced by AI and not replaced by AI, something that I think is super valuable for anyone who wants to learn about new companies in the sort of like realm of AI.
A little bit about LTX Studio, and you want to expand on that, and how creators have control over that. And I think it's very relevant to what we're speaking about in terms of having control over over your own narrative, and how you guys as a company present your narrative to the media, or when leveraging PR opportunities. how important is that to have control over that? And how much control do you think that you can, based off of your experience, have over that in general, especially as Lightricks does work with creators? And I'm sure your products are, I remember when Facetune, blew up essentially in terms of what it did for the creator, community ecosystem. So how do you balance that control over, kind of letting it organically happen?
I have to say that any company that would rather have its own narrative as opposed to like its users' narrative is doing something wrong. I mean, for all we care is making sure that, our users are at the front, that we're catering to their needs, that our, if we tell, and I think specifically from PR, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about the fact that my role within the company, I'm also in charge of internal comms and influencers, and the element of storytelling is super important and crucial. We're not necessarily just, sending out press releases and sending out narratives, but to make sure that what you say inside is what you say outside and that you have the users sort of like speaking and echoing that messaging. So I think like I have to say it's like not necessarily that hard of a task to balance it because we rather have other people vouch for us and talk about how much they enjoy using our products as opposed to just like saying it ourselves. Um, and I'm saying at the same time, I think like there are a lot of challenges with everything that's going on around with PR and again going back to AI, just because it's a new space, it's a super saturated space, and there's a lot of, to grab attention the right way is very hard. And you have to kind of like walk between the lines of those who are completely sort of like affiliated and immersed with AI and those who contradict it and have different opinions on it. And I think again, kind of going back to how I was talking about the introduction of the company, that idea of like having human creativity enhanced with AI allows us to sort of navigate that space a little bit in an easier manner, I would say. Um, and yeah, it's harder in terms of like grabbing attention because there's so much noise and so much going on, and every day there's like a new announcement. But that's where the users again that they come in because if they use the product and they enjoy the product, then usually that will also grab the attention on whoever you're pitching to.
No, that's such an interesting point that you make there about, you've got to really have that human element, because I say AI is kind of all over the place now. Everyone's integrating AI into pretty much everything, it seems. And if they're not, they're sort of, falling behind a little bit. But from what you're saying, you also want to have third parties essentially endorsing Lightricks and your products, and have that human feel. So obviously that's important to you. But how do you get that balance right between the technology side, which is obviously important, but the human side as well, especially in PR?
I think you have to listen to the user all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, people always think that it's only from a product perspective. It's not. It's also from like a brand perspective and a PR perspective. You have to listen to the discourse online. You have to understand how people are reacting to the things that you do. I do think that in the sense of like thinking of AI, people are very hesitant, and it's kind of like a sort of like a rolling basis in acceptance. I feel like we've gone through the phase of like the early adopters, and now it's a little bit more common, and people are a little bit more receptive to it. And when you think of the fact that people find the benefit in what you provide the user, then it's a lot easier again to navigate the entire conversation as a whole. Like it's not about if you're thinking of the product, for instance, and you want to create a flow that will cater to the creative pipeline of that user, and AI will be enhancing that creative pipeline, then there shouldn't be any contradiction. So the user will find value in it, and you as a company will be able to provide it. And I think that's something that we're trying to do as an ongoing basis. Understand what our users needs, talk to them, talk to our design partners. Like nothing that we do here is sort of like in this, you know, a void of like decision making. You know what I'm saying? It's we're trying to make sure that every decision is rooted in an intent, a creative intent. And I think that's something that allows us to not look at AI as this sort of like fearful thing that is replacing other people or taking away from their creativity, but rather enhances them.
So in essence, PR 101, which is find the pain points and speak to them.
Yeah, I mean, find the pain points, press hard so you get attention, and then yeah. But for sure, I'll be honest with you. I think so many people think of like PR in the sense of like telling the story and keeping it like so super so solid and like holistic and whatnot. And I think that PR is also about making a mess and creating conversation and engaging. You know what I'm saying? And I don't necessarily have all the answers, and I don't necessarily know how things will trickle down. And I think I always have to be mindful of like, okay, whether something that we'll do might get any backlash, or would it be something that is too aggressive or whatnot. But at the same time, my role in a sense is to create the conversation as well, right? So
Mm.
I rather be interesting and annoying than blend. So it's something that, it's also a very delicate manner. It's like, yes, we're very much holistic around like our approach around AI, and we found our sort of like our stance. But at the same time, like technology is hitting us all, and we're very much aware of it. And I think we want to be, accepting it and validating it, and being part of that wave instead of contradicting it. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun little battlefield.
For sure. I think that also Lightricks is in a very unique position where your products cater to creators, which, you know, with new media and that aspect of things, you guys are the technology you're providing is fueling kind of the media that comes around what Lightricks does, right? To the creators. It's go ahead.
Yeah,
I
it's
see
no,
you
no,
have
it's
something to
it's a
say.
cycle. I will say this, that we've gone through this very sort of interesting transition. We've always been focused on creators, but I think we all have different um sort of like definitions to creators, because some of our tools are very much catered towards professionals. And with some of our tools, we're trying to create adaptation. And some of our tools, even our newest sort of like technologies, is text to video, image to video generation models, which are, like Lightricks has been known for this product company. Like we do edit the editing experience really well. But now we also do like image to video, which is this whole new space that we're trying to sort of like navigate. And I think it's just it's not boring, which is extremely fun, and very much, every day is like a learning curve in itself. The other thing is that it has to all come together. It has to all make sense. It has to come to make sense for the creators. It has to come to make sense for the professionals. It has to come to make sense to enterprise companies who are looking to buy our services. At the end of the day, going back to what we said, it's about like this intent or something that they need, or a pain point that they find, and we need to cater to it. And that's why, we have sub brands and the company brand. And people always ask me about like this distinction between like, oh, how do you tell the Lightrick story, how do you tell the Facetune story? And for all I care, like they have to align with one another, otherwise, there's no reason for them to be together in the first place. So yeah, it's a buffalo of different products, in a very, I don't know how to say this, but like ongoing, ever-changing space. Yeah.
What's the road to getting to the strategy that works? How do you build a strategy that works for your specific case as Lightricks?
So I have to say this: whoever tells you that they know what the hell they're doing, they're lying. I'm just like being very blunt. Like PR changes daily, and I think one
Mm-hmm.
of the things that people are sort of like, I don't know how to say this, but they're sort of like reluctant to understand, is that media, the landscape is changing daily. And I used to
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, I have to do everything in a traditional manner. It's sort of like, have a pitch ready and whatever, have some sort of a press release and do an embargo and whatnot. Like, if you want to get the conversation going and to tell your story, it's not necessarily in a singular funnel, and it's not necessarily through the company name. It could be like, I never go out with any news that I have without having at least some sort of a solidified brand ambassador or user that would want to sort of like echo what we're saying. Um, and there's no sort of like one glove fits all. I think when you work with different reporters in the tech sphere specifically, they have different things that interest them. Some of them sort of like they like the business scope a little bit better than they like the creator scope, or some of them want more data. Some of them want to test the product before everyone else because they're super, they want to feel like they're special. So it's different. Some are more technical than others. I think one of the things that we found initially were, with everything that was going on around the transition into AI, was that there are different levels in which reporters were talking about AI. At the beginning, the conversation was very sort of like shallow, like everyone, oh, AI is going to replace this, AI automates this, AI, like it was very shallow. And for us as a company, that was very difficult because like we were doing AI before AI was cool. Like there was AI faced in 12 years ago, and before everyone was, talking about these, buzzwords and all these headlines
Mhm.
and what we've learned and what if I've learned is also as a professional, like again, if someone speaks to one of our executives or anyone from the company, I try to make sure that they're, knowledgeable enough in the type of conversation that we're going to have. We think that AI is such an interesting, like pivotal point in technology. And we don't want to be talking to someone, not that we disregard their work or understanding, but like we have a lot more to offer than, small sort of like headlines for clickbaits opportunities or whatnot. Yeah, so it's just been a sort of like ever-changing situation for us with pitching and understanding the landscape.
Yeah, that's definitely my experience of PR as well. It's very dynamic, very fast paced, and you can never like kind of rest on your laurels because they say it's always changing.
Yes.
Um, I just, just to kind of deep a little bit dig into what you deep a little bit
Dive a
deeper.
little bit
Sorry,
deeper.
that's the one. Thank you, Shani. Gosh,
There
see,
you
this
go.
is what happens. Anyway,
We're gonna cut
so
all the errors so you guys hear us. Yeah. Go
no,
ahead.
let's
Yeah.
let's keep that. Why not? We're going to
Yeah.
dig a little bit deeper, is what I was going for, into
Mm.
what you were just saying about the reporters. How do you find the reporters who have that level of knowledge and expertise that you need to talk to?
It's a trial and error. Like it's not necessarily kind of like I want to say even if they work for a specific publication doesn't necessarily mean that they understand. Not that I disregard them or their professional or whatnot. It's just what they're required to report on or what interests them within that scope, which is completely legitimate, and it's fine, it's okay. And I will say this, that like we like to go technical on AI. We like to go dirty on AI. We like to talk about the glitches, about what's not working. We like to have it all out there, even on our own products. I think like that's part of our credibility in the conversation. We hear, we see what works, what doesn't, and we want to be able to talk about it. And I think you it's not necessarily about finding the people who understand AI as opposed to those who don't. I think it's more about building relationships with reporters. So you're able to bring them to the side of the conversation that they will be more receptive to diving deeper to what interests you. And we've been working really, really hard. And I want to say for the past 4 years that I've been with the company, like there's a bunch of reporters that like again they're super friendly with us, they're friendly with our CEO, they appreciate him and his opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean that they cover us all the time, it doesn't necessarily mean that they care about every single thing that Lightrick does, but I think like we've been able to sort of like not be in a situation where a PR field is a one-off, meaning that we start from scratch every time we pitch or try to do something. And the other thing is that it doesn't necessarily like we don't have to introduce ourselves. We're already sort of like engraved in their memory. They know who we are. And then we're able to not only tell them a new story, but build upon older stories that we had. Yeah, which is really, really fun. Yeah.
You talked about brand ambassadors earlier, and I think that that's a really big thing in the PR landscape. We see a lot of now more recently just thought leadership, thought leadership, thought leadership, especially with LinkedIn becoming the new kind of place for people to you know bring their expertise to and
Hmm.
and show that side of things. And you're working with brand ambassadors, and I see a lot of kind of influencers and companies bringing in influencers or into the conversation to advocate for them. You being a part of Lightricks and working with creators as well as professionals, like you said, how are you guys bringing in those brand ambassadors, and how are they showing up for you guys in terms of PR opportunities?
I have to say that they're great. Okay, there's two things that we need to talk about. A, it's a pay for play. Those of you who tell you that it isn't, like, are lying, and it's completely legitimate that it is a pay for play,
Hmm.
right? I think that when both sides understand that there's a pay for play, but then they come meet together and they see the value of working with each other, they're also able to recognize the value with the product and their joint opportunity. And then for the creator itself, it's more than just a pay for play, and for the company. But it starts off from the pay for play, which is extremely okay and legitimate. And the other thing that I want to say around brand ambassador, which I think is really important, is um, I feel like their audience would sense if they're not being authentic and if they're sort of like overselling something. And I think we usually don't try to put them in the position where they have to oversell something. We take into consideration when we pay for something, it has to be sponsored. So like their audience would know, which is completely
Mhm.
fine and something that we take into consideration. The other thing is that I think we've been trying to find the creators that really affiliate with us, that we feel like that our product will bring them value regardless of whether we do this collaboration or not. And I think we were able to do that with a lot of, work and iteration on what worked and what didn't work, and sort of like trial and error with a lot of different brand ambassadors. And at the end of the day, these people have, I want to say, like two roles. One, they have today, influencers are reporters to any extent.
Mhm.
They report on the news, and I think like a lot of people who deal with PR and they're like, oh, influencers is another thing. No, it's not. It's a news cycle, and you need to take into consideration that like that's something that as much as you're putting effort into pitching to publications and writing your whatever thought leadership, you should be doing that as well.
Mhm.
And again, going back to what I said about the conversation being super saturated and the fact that um, it's really hard to get through the noise right now. And influencers are a really good way to get through the noise because they have a solidified audience. Um, they talk about your product in a way that is very authentic. Even if when they get a brief, at least from us, I don't necessarily want to, advocate for any other company working with influencers, but like we say it as it is, and if it's reporting about what we have, then, at the end of the day, like they have to test the product themselves. They have to create something. They have to create content with our product. So they wouldn't be showcasing, like if they showcase our video, then they at least had a demo. They have a subscription, they've touched the product. They can speak to it. They're not necessarily just putting a
Mhm.
video up there and just like, this is so cool. Like, it's not going to work. We know that it's not going to work. And I think the more that people in the industry and the PR sort of like relam understand the value of creators, the more that it will impact the overall news cycle, because they use platforms like LinkedIn, which became really dominant and prominent for everyone. And at the end of the day, the reporters follow them, right? So,
Mhm.
imagine, I think another thing that I kind of want to add to that, and sorry for me being super long with what I say, but um I think people have this tendency of thinking that PR is not a part of marketing, or comms is like it's a separate unit in a sense.
Mhm.
And PR is another touch point to users, right? Whether they got through an ad, through retention marketing, or read it somewhere, it's a touch point. And the more that they see those touch points, the more chances that they'll convert into using, trying it out, downloading. So you can take those two apart. Yes, they have different KPIs, measure differently and whatnot. At the end of the day, if you want to make sure that you're everywhere, you need to take all these different channels into consideration. And for all I care, like I need to know what's going on in the ads, and I need to know what we're doing for all the creatives, and I need to know everything else that's going on because we have to tell this cohesive story. It's every touch point matters.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, nowadays there's so many different opportunities for touch points, and I think people probably need more touch points than they ever have done in the past to go with a product. So it's really vital. But just to kind of touch about what you were saying, do you ever try and tap into current media trends, or do you kind of just stick with your agenda, and just kind of build that way?
We try. I wouldn't necessarily I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you whether it's successful or not. Sometimes it is. Again, going back to like if anyone ever tells you that they know how to make things go viral, they're lying. So it's all the lies that I'm telling you today. Like, or,
Mhm.
but I think. It's a balance between like sort of like hopping on trends, and because you never know what you can gain, and no
Mhm.
opportunity, you don't want an opportunity to be a missed opportunity. So we do like hop on trends and try to be a part of the conversation and whatnot. But I feel like at the same time, one of the things that I really like that we're doing right now with LTX Studio, our AI storytelling creative development platform, we're focusing on education. And I think that really changed the way that we approach the conversation online, because a education is immediate value. It really trajects in the way that people understand, like, oh, like this is a tutorial, or this is like an how whatever a guide, or something that like would help me understand like how I can use this. It takes down a lot of these barriers that people would wanna, would have, and it comes off as less marketing. I want to say like less salesy. Um, and I really like what we're doing there, because we're the guy who's doing our social media is there is doing an amazing job. I'm kind of like biased because I hired him, but like he's doing a really good job. And at the same time, like I think the idea of like tackling stuff from an educational standpoint and not necessarily like trend standpoint is that allows you to sort of like speak to people in sort of like eye level, and also not necessarily fall into the trends that you don't belong to, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So you're a lot more authentic, and you're a lot more distinct within the conversation. So yeah, it's a balance.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Just to, if I may, I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask another question. You know, you guys are working, like I said previously, and I've said again, and you said creators and professionals, and pertaining to PR for Lightricks. Can you share an example where maybe your team had to steer public perception of Lightricks on something that happened maybe in the news, perhaps, maybe a creator's comment or something else, or external factors that contributed to public perception of Lightricks, and maybe how you steered the conversation or addressed
So
the
yeah, I would say address, because I never try to steer away. Like I'm not trying to hide anything. That's something that I think is worth sort of like putting out there. There's one in this. I have a couple of examples. I think from a corporate perspective, a lot of people talk about like trying to think. Let's dive into Facetune specifically.
Mhm.
Facetune has been criticized for a lot of conversation around like I want to say beauty standards and everything that that app enables. And I think one of the things that we really double down on is acknowledging that and not shying away from it. And at the same time, also 100% owning it. We want people to enjoy editing. And if they enjoy it, then they should be able to do it with no judgment. So I think like a lot of the conversation that we had was about like how, everything is sort of like negative around that sort of, usage of the app. And there's so many different use cases that we were able to highlight of people who enjoy editing, feeling more confident with themselves by utilizing the app. And to the extent of, and I advise everyone to go on our LinkedIn page. I think we posted this amazing creator um, from the trans community that spoke about like how Facetune sort of like saved their lives because they were able to sort of like test their transition using the app. And I think, just showcasing how it's not necessarily that narrow, and not necessarily sort of like as stereotyped as people made it, is something that we didn't try to steer away from, but we were trying to highlight the examples of the people who enjoy editing, and it's okay, just as they enjoy to, go to the doctors and do Botox, or go on a diet, or whatever that they want to do in order to feel good with themselves. They don't need to feel that extra judgment, and we wanted to tap into that. Or even the cases of like people who I think, I was very touched, and it was luckily it was more than one person that we encounter, of people who really found this tool is something that, was for them more than just trying things. It was a way to sort of like revisualize themselves and understand what they want to become. And I think like again, just being proud of the company and proud of who we are, that's super meaningful from a PR perspective, from a company perspective. So I guess that's one example that yeah, that I have top of my head.
That's really interesting. And like, I like, were you there at the time where this criticism was faced? And then how did you think of like, of course you said address it.
Yeah.
Did you dive into what the company has already kind of started, and you shared that user story to bring out kind of that story, or to share like the other side of things, if that makes sense? Like, this is part of what we do as well as, you know, PR specialists, so like we understand kind of the thought process to go through it, but I just want to dive deeper into that and how you
So it's funny because I'm smiling because you know, I'm talking 4 years in, right? I have experience, but I remember starting out, I had no idea what I was doing. Not in the sense of like not knowing what I was doing, but I think like I started out at Lightricks and I was a power user of Facetune. I used to edit everything, and I remember I had a friend working for the company, and they showed me Facetune. I was just like, get me this, you know, like I was so excited. And then and I downloaded the app and I became like this power user. So prior to me working for the company, they would used to do user interviews with me, right? And then I sort of like had lived the dream of like working for the company that I, you know, was using their products. And I remember the first time we had sort of I want to say a PR crisis. I think one of I don't remember which news channel or TV show in the US called one of our founders directly for a response. And you know, when we didn't have sort of like infrastructure for PR, like people would just like whatever, write to whoever, or you know, just call randomly to one of our founders that had no clue what to say or what to do. And initially, like it took me a while until like I really understood how to navigate it. But I think y- initially, yes, I would kind of like get nervous, and I even remember kind of like running around the office trying to like draft something myself and then sending it to the PR team, and you know, like I didn't have that experience. And I think now over the years, like we've understood that in order to, going back to what we spoke about, like brand ambassadors, right? Like you don't want to find yourself in that situation again, right? So you work with people and you gather your information, you gather your data, and now it's a lot more constructed. So I've had several situations that this has happened, but I want to say for the most part, after I want to say my 6, 7 months in, I was already ready. I knew the company stance. I knew what it was required for me to do also internally. Like, you know, the company stance is something that is ever changing. The landscape is ever changing. The conversation is ever changing. You have to revisit it. You have to align with your management. You have to align with the product team. So that was kind of like an ongoing thing. Um, and yeah, I think other than that initial example where I told you that like they caught me off guard, you know, I was prepared. Like yeah, I was lucky enough to have influencers already talking and vouching for us, and having enough of examples of like what we're doing with the users, together with the users, in order to sort of like echo, you know, a countering message to what they were trying to portray. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the key message here within this conversation is like, when a crisis comms thing, you know, situation happens, uh, to address it head on, and you can't shy away from those things, because the media is too smart to
Everyone.
try to
Yeah.
avoid that. Yeah.
I think it's funny how like I remember that we all used to like delete comments, which is like the worst thing you could do. And you know, today you're just like again, and I think one of the things that I wish that if anyone listens to us is like you rather have that sort of like, I don't know how to say this, but like you rather be interesting than irrelevant. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And it's such a teaching experience to see those comments and learn how to work around them, as opposed to deleting them and ignoring them as if they were never there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think that pertaining to, let's say, the creator, you know, ecosystem, there's this thing of cancel culture, and
Mm,
how cancel culture isn't, I don't like, in my personal opinion, to bring it out there, I don't think it's a legitimate thing, because as we see with new media and influencers and creators and stuff like that. You can be your own kind of news source in person. And so you can't really get rid of that, and you can't just cancel and it be done. There's no avoiding it. So facing
Yeah.
those things head on.
I was just going to kind of piggyback off what you were saying, Shani,
Yeah.
and what Ido was saying, that preparation as well for these situations. So you know how you're going to handle a situation ahead of time. So when it happens, you kind of have an idea of what you're doing, as opposed to kind of like, you know, reaching around in the dark. And that's actually really interesting. I guess that's the last 4 years for you. But I guess, you know, looking forward over the next 3 to 5 years, you know, what do you think Lightricks' narrative will be? How do you think AI is going to change over the next few years?
I think Lightricks is going to be a super interesting player within the ecosystem for two reasons. One, I think people don't necessarily understand the type of technology that we come to see here at our offices, and it takes a while for us to get it out there, but it's insane. Like, people don't understand what the future holds, the possibility that it holds, the creative possibility that it holds. And for Lightricks as a company to there's a couple of elements that I think makes us really interesting. Like, we were always the David to the Goliath, like there was Adobe and there was us, and like, we're always that interesting in that capacity. And I think that's we're going to continue seeing that, and even I think like to some extent we're going to grow to being a Goliath ourselves, because we're not only focusing on the product layer, we're doubling down on the technology. Our new video generation model is out of this world. And I think people, they look at video generation models and they're like, oh, the quality here is amazing. The quality here is whatever. And our model is real-time generation. So I don't think people clock in what real-time generation means. Like, imagine that, like, you're not gonna need to wait for a result for like a good 3 minutes until you get the video that you want to see, right? Like, you're gonna see it on the spot. It takes us, I don't know, 2 seconds to generate like a 5 seconds video. It's
Wow.
insane. That means that, people are going to be able to tell stories as they, walk and talk and do other things. So with that in mind, I think like Lightricks is going to be an extremely interesting player, both from the product element and both from the technology element. I think there's this premise around companies right now on whether you're going vertical and sort of like defining your use case with a particular audience and what you do, or do you stay horizontal and kind of like you see how these like large language models are just kind of wrapping around everyone. And I think no one knows the answer of where the coin's gonna, like, whether customization is gonna win or just those large language models are gonna win. And I think Lightrace is kind of like doing both. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how players are sort of like tap into the technology, the product, the vertical, the horizontal, how they navigate the space, as opposed to like these. Again, if we look at the creator economy, a lot of companies that were like small companies, they were they were acquired, they were like they pitched, they were evaluated, and then they disappeared because they didn't have, solid ground to stand on. And Lightricks is not like that. And I think we're just going to see more and more creative technology coming off of Lightricks, and it's super exciting.
That's really exciting. So thank you. I think that we have just one last question. I'll let Ariel take this one away.
Oh, you're too kind, Shani. Yeah, we're just going to ask, what advice would you give to other brands looking to implement PR strategies into their larger marketing communications mix?
I would say just try and learn. I know it's going to sound like very simple, but I think like people overthink when it comes to PR, and you need to sort of like get burned in order to learn and readjust. And I think there's this tendency of focusing on the fluff instead of focusing on the practicality. I remember having agencies in the past where they had like 20 items on the agenda. I was just like, none of them were happening. Like, I had 0 articles, but I have 20 items on my agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the idea of like trying, and if it doesn't work, move on to the next thing, and being extremely practical is the essence of like doing good PR. People think it's like storytelling, and what you're going to figure out your storytelling. But first, try and say something. You know what I'm saying? See that it doesn't work, and then reiterate. Too many people sort of like stand on the foundation of like what traditional PR is, and they don't understand that you rather be in the sense of doing than in the sense of planning or thinking or yeah. So I really hope for anyone who listens to this conversation to just pitch the out of their company and just try it out. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ido.
That was our conversation with Ido Cohen, VP of Global Brand and Communications at Lightricks. We hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. If you're a founder trying to get your startup noticed, a marketer looking to up your PR game, or just curious about the stories behind the headlines, we hope this conversation gave you more of an inside look.
Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you have any questions or suggestions on topics we should talk about, send us your thoughts at prontheRec@gmail.com. That's prontheREC@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. And again, I'm Shahni.
And I'm Ariel. This is PR on the record, going off the record. See you next time.